evening. It's quite a short update really in terms of how life has progressed in the last 5 weeks or so since I was stood here last, briefing you on the new application for the IFA2 project. So hopefully I won't take up too much more of the evening and we can move on to the questions. So since the 23rd of May, what have we done? I think at the time I said we sent out our letters. We sent out nearly 5,000 letters. You can see there we've had a fairly good response. As I left the office this evening, we've now tipped over 900, and there's still a pile for my colleagues to register and acknowledge. So if you haven't received an acknowledgement yet, we're working through them, but the volume is such there is a slight delay. And you'll see there the majority are raising concerns and objections. There's only a small number in support at the moment. A lot of the issues that we saw potentially coming up in your letters are coming up, and there's a number of them there. There's more than that. Things like alternative sites has come up, the issue of drilling, falling, and also the matter of calling and whether the Secretary of State should take a role and call the application in. But I'm going to take you through some of the issues or the progress on some of the issues. The application remains under consideration at the moment, so there's not many answers for you. It's more an update on how things have happened in the last 5 weeks. So thinking about landscape impact, and a lot of representations make reference to the gap, strategic gap, building in the gap, what the implications for the gap. We, as an organisation, as a local planning authority, we're taking some specialist landscape advice. We've instructed a consultant to come in and give us some advice to appraise, to critique, to challenge the applicant's environmental impact assessment, specifically its landscape chapters and its views chapters. I think you remember, if you were here last time, I showed you some views and photo montages of how landscaping was going to mature. So we're asking someone to give us some independent advice appraising the application. We're also looking, or we have instructed a surveyor to look at the impact of the converter station building and the cable run, for that matter, on the enterprise zone and the attractiveness of the enterprise zone. Many representations have expressed to me the importance of the enterprise zone and the jobs that it's going to be delivering. If you put a big box next to that, or you have a high voltage cable run, does that affect the attractiveness of the site to businesses? So we're taking some advice on that, and hopefully that will either say there's no impact, or if there is an impact, how it can be mitigated, if mitigation can be provided. The second main bullet point in the middle of the slide there is looking at airfield operations. A lot of comments have been received dealing with how is this going to impact on navigational equipment, on flights, on radio interference, electromagnetic fields, compasses. We don't have in-house resource to deal with that, so we are, like the other two at the top of the screen, we're taking advice and we're in the process of securing that advice to give us some independent guidance on the appropriateness of the applicant's submissions. We're again critiquing, analysing, challenging where necessary the submission on those specific issues to do with airfield operations and incoming and departing flights. A lot of third parties are making reference in their letters to me about health impacts and actually the unknown in terms of the application. I was here 5 weeks ago saying we've consulted Public Health England as the relevant government body to do with electromagnetic fields, and you can see there they've given us some commentary to suggest it's not likely to have significant impacts on health. The application submits that what emissions are coming out of the converter station are well below the government guidance and the safe threshold levels. Flooding was raised previously due to ground conditions, and there was a challenge, I think, as a question from the floor about the quality of the flood risk assessment submitted by the applicant. You can see there the Environment Agency have raised no objection. The comments from Public Health England and the Environment Agency are all online, so you can read them in depth. I'm sort of summarising the headlines, if you like. But their no objection is on the basis that the flood risk management and the flood risk remediation measures are imposed and provided for by the applicant, and on that basis they are expressing that there's no objection. So what happens next? As I said, all the application consultations will be online for you to read, as are all your comments. They'll all be logged and online. The application remains under consideration at the moment. You heard from Councillor Woodward. It's heading towards an autumn planning committee, all being well. committee until I've got my outstanding consultation advice. There are still some consultees that haven't provided their full advice to me, so they'll be added to the website as they come in. And then we get the chance to appraise that information, to review that information, to challenge the applicant, depending what our consultees say and what their consultation advice is. If necessary, we can ask them to make further revisions, to change the application and amend it as we see necessary to hopefully progress the application. All being well, we'll have a recommendation to the Planning Committee in the autumn. At the moment, we don't know what that's going to be because there's still this outstanding consultation advice and outstanding issues, and the fact that we're still seeking some specialist advice. But all being well, the target for the applicant is to go to the autumn or September to the Planning Committee. I mentioned right at the start, one of the issues that's come out of third-party comments is the request for the Secretary of State to call in the application. This has been made, I think, by the combined 3 residents' associations, as well as the Residents' Association request to the Secretary of State. A lot of third-party letters, your letters, are making reference to the fact that the Secretary of State should call it in. Well, we've contacted and have a dialogue now with the National Planning Casework Unit, who are the organisation on behalf of the Secretary of State that will look at this. At the minute, their advice is we'll let it run its course, we'll let it go through the consultation process, we'll let it go through the representation process where you make our comments to us, and they'll wait for the local planning authority to make a recommendation to planning committee. So we've got a file note ready that once we get to the point of making our recommendation, writing a committee report, we'll refer that to the planning casework unit, and it's at that point the Secretary of State will make a decision on whether or not it will be called in. That's all I have. So it's a very brief, quick update because we're still in that consultation period, still in that representation period. We extended it to the end of the month, which runs till Thursday this week, so there's still a couple of days for letters to come in. We did say back in May, if letters come in after that, we'll continue to accept them and we'll accept them up until we get to committee. But if you can get them in this week, that would be most helpful. Nothing else. Thank you, Councillor.
Abilities as far as this application is concerned, and of course we have 2. We have Fareham Borough Council, as I said earlier, as landlord for the site. We own the land, and we have the Borough Council as the local planning authority, which are 2 very separate, very distinct elements. So the decision which was made by the Borough Council as landlord some months ago was that in principle we would be prepared to lease 10 acres of land at Daedalus to National Grid for their interconnector, but with a great string of provisos, one of which, very obviously of course, was their ability to get a planning consent from the local planning authority, but other things that we've also made very clear along the way is that we will not, as landlord, permit anything to take place on our land at Daedalus which is going to adversely affect the running of the enterprise zone and the airfield at Daedalus, and I've always been very, very clear about that. So that's not to say we wouldn't permit something which has an effect, because of course some effects can be mitigated, but that we would not be prepared to have something happening there which is demonstrably going to adversely affect essentially our vision for Daedalus, and the vision which I know is shared widely in the Stubbington and Hillhead area. So what that means is that the in principle decision was made to lease with all of those subject tos, and it's very much an if the planning committee decides to give a planning consent for the interconnector, that is not the end of the matter, because then it comes back to the council as landlord. It's sort of notwithstanding what the planning committee has said. Of course, if the planning committee says no, then that's it, it's dead. But if the planning committee says yes, it's still not necessarily yes, it goes ahead, because if we as landlord still feel that there are adverse effects on our asset at Daedalus, then we could still say no. So that means that there's sort of 3 phases. We've been through phase 1, which is yes in principle with all those caveats. Planning committee is phase 2, and then even after that planning committee meeting, of course, then there'd have to be the detailed application for what the thing actually looks like. So it's still not going to enter the matter, and then ultimately, if there is a planning consent given, then it's back to the council as landlord again to decide finally whether it actually goes ahead. So I hope that's helpful setting some perspectives, and now it's over to you for any questions, comments, and I can't answer them. I'm sure Mark will be able to.